The couch, once warm now, felt cold. As I sat down, she would be home soon. She was always home. When the kids stepped off the school bus, I drew the curtains because the sunlight pouring into the living room felt oppressive. Right now today, the darkness seemed both foreboding and comforting. I wasn't eager to confront her. I was neither morally nor emotionally prepared to handle this. More than anything, I feared my own anger. As a child, I had a tendency toward angry outbursts. As an adult, I had become unsure, but regardless, this had to happen quickly as the school bus was due in about an hour. They couldn't know. I would do everything in my power to make sure they didn't find out. 10 years of marriage had been wasted, 10 years of my life thrown away, 10 years of planning and dreaming gone. I had no future left to hope for nothing. A reasonable person might think about what they were going to say or how to approach the upcoming conversation. Every time I tried to come up with a clever line or remark, nothing came to mind. It always led back to the same question: saw pity. I felt sorry for myself and regretted what my children might have to endure. That was unacceptable. I had no plan of action. I sat there waiting mindless for the situation to unfold. I was not ready. Died. I was finishing the last of my warm beer when she opened the door. "John. Why the hell are you sitting in the dark?" She walked over to the window to pull back the curtains. "No, let them stay closed for a bit." It was an unusual situation. I was never home in the middle of the day. I was always at work. Maybe that was part of the problem. She looked thoughtful as she took off her bag and jacket. "Are you sick?" "No, just feeling down and disappointed." "Do you want to talk about it?" "Is there anything I can do?" "There's nothing you can do, but I do want to talk about it. I just don't know how or where to start." "Is everything okay at work?" "Stop, please just stop. Just sit down and listen. I'll try to say what I need to." "You don't have to say anything. In fact, I'd prefer if you didn't." Courtney sat down and stared at her hands. I heard her quietly mutter under her breath, "Well, damn, I know about you and Mitch Cooper." She slowly looked up at me, and even in the dimly lit room, I could see the moisture in her eyes, not quite tears, but almost she started to say something, but I raised my hand out. I didn't know what to do. I had no plan. In frustration, I hurled the empty long grief bottle across the room and headed toward the front door. She stood up but did nothing to try to stop me. Recovery. I had no idea where I was going or what I was going to do. Questions like that were foreign to me. First and foremost, there were the kids. Courtney and I both grew up in dysfunctional families. I had sworn that no matter what, my children would never have to go through the same thing. That meant divorce was not an option. It also meant I couldn't abandon them. I was in deep trouble. My first stop was at Gilbert Enterprises. There was plenty of vacation time in the schedule and I had no trouble getting a week off. I had a small team of employees, but they were competent and could handle my responsibilities during my absence. I had started working at the company 12 years ago as a draftsman apprentice, and now I ran the entire graphics department overseeing a small support staff. I had worked hard and was rewarded for my efforts. It looked like our summer trip to Dollywood was off the table. Not long after I started working at the company, I met Courtney. I've always been a bit puzzled by how we met. It was something like a party at one of the engineers' houses. I was there and suddenly she was there with me. It wasn't like I was pursuing her or anything. She started chatting, which was unusual because girls usually avoided me. I wasn't what you'd call an ideal guy. I was too skinny, too tall, and kind of awkward. Courtney was a year ahead of me in high school and hung out with the cool kids. In fact, I remembered that she spent a lot of time with one of the guys who tried to mimic Funny. His name was Mitch. One thing led to another, and in less than a year we were married and expected the time. Everything normal and I was happy and she happy ordinary in every way. She didn't stand out in a crowd and she didn't attract attention in my eyes, though she was perfection itself. A year after our son Bobby was born, we had a daughter. Danny. Everything was just wonderful for 10 years. Typically people spend a lot of money at restaurants when they're celebrating something. I ended up spending an unreasonable amount of my favorite sushi bar trying to drown my sorrows. The menu wasn't anything out of the ordinary, and I tried all the delicacies I had always refused because of the price. 2 hours later, I found myself in a hotel room, parting with my expensive indulgence. It would have been better to keep it than to throw it up. I was just never good at these soft penny parties. I needed a plan. I needed help. I had a whole week to figure something out, gathering the facts. There was no point in dealing with insurance receipts or credit cards. There was nothing to change. Our lifestyle had to remain the same. I knew Courtney would need to provide some kind of explanation, but I really didn't want to hear it. If she had confessed everything, and I had been forced to accept what she said, then I would have officially become a chuckled dot. I couldn't figure out how to avoid that. She couldn't or wouldn't deny it. That wasn't in her character. I had no idea how deep the relationship went. I didn't know how long it had been going on or how serious it was. Was she planning to leave me? 2. Many questions were left unanswered. Finally, I found a few old school friends who were aware of Mitch and Courtney's relationship. Interestingly, it seemed like they had never really broken up. As far as everyone knew, they had always been a couple. Some of them knew that I had married Courtney, but that was it. Mitch Cooper was a handsome guy and very charismatic, the complete opposite of me. He didn't have much ambition, either in school or in his career. He barely graduated from high school and had spent the last 10 years working at the local Firestone tire company. He wasn't a manager, just a tire technician. There's nothing wrong with being a tire technician, but at some point most people move up to managing the store. Mitch was still at the entry level and he seemed content with that. I was baffled what was so appealing about him. I had worked tirelessly to provide for my family and I was rewarded with betrayal. I thought other women would appreciate my efforts, but none of them ever showed any interest in me. I was with Courtney because she wanted me to be with her. But then why? I spent the entire day talking to old friends, acquaintances, and classmates. After putting everything together, I had a pretty clear picture. Courtney and Mitch had never had a falling out as far as everyone knew. They had always been a couple and many of them assumed they still were. I had never asked about relationship with him. I didn't want to know. I figured it was in the past and that she had moved on. I wasn't jealous, suspicious, or concerned about my marriage. I suppose that was my mistake. Now I knew I had to confront her. It would be difficult for me, and I'm sure for her as well. I just hoped she hadn't hurt me too deeply. Of course, I still had no idea what I hoped to achieve or how I planned to resolve the situation. Answers. The next evening I managed to get a small private table at Luciano's. We could talk without worrying about being overheard or interrupted. Courtney arrived right on time, looking good but clearly troubled by something. She sat down and smiled but didn't say a word. We ordered, ate, and enjoyed some wine. It was, to say the least, awkward. Neither of us mentioned the issue that had arisen. Finally, when the coffee arrived, I decided it was time to open Pandora's box. Can I get some kind of explanation without the emotional rhetoric? Instead of trying to explain, could you tell me exactly what you want to know? Maybe that would make things easier and faster. Was this a way to avoid revealing something I didn't know? Or was it an honest response to my request? How long? It was a short question, and I hoped for a short answer. 12 years. Needless to say, I was shocked, and I'm sure it showed on my face. She noticed my reaction and looked away, avoiding my contact. You've been seeing him the entire time we have been married. Yes, there was no sugarcoating. In her response, it was short and to the point. She sat there quietly, waiting for my next question. I could barely hold myself together. Part of me wanted to get up and leave, but I really needed a better answer. I signaled the waiter to refill the coffee. Things were not going the way I had expected. Why did you marry me? I tried to keep my questions simple, but I knew this one would have a more complicated answer. In short, because you could give me what he couldn't, or would, in that answer brought up a whole new set of questions. I hesitated to ask too quickly, because I didn't want to interrupt the conversation. I was surprised by my own ability to hold back, and then I realized that I was actually becoming intrigued by the direction of the conversation. But why did you choose me? I didn't. He did. Courtney, I think we've reached the point where you need to stop giving me brief answers. I want to need an explanation. I promise I'll sit here and stay quiet until you explain this in a way that makes sense, okay? But before I begin, please believe me when I say that there was never any intention to be malicious or to hurt you in any way. We never did or said anything that was meant to disrespect you. Aside from the fact that she had deliberately turned me into a cuckold, I had to agree with her. I nodded for her to continue. Mitch and I were very close for many years and swore loyalty to each other. We were truly in love, like something out of a movie or a cheesy romance novel. As cliché as it sounds, we were real soulmates, but we had one major issue that we couldn't resolve. I wanted a home and a family, and Mitch flat out refused to even consider it. After months of struggling with this, we finally decided we'd try to find a surrogate husband. We had no idea what we were doing, but at the time it seemed like a good idea. Finding the right guy wasn't easy. He had to be someone we thought could provide a stable environment and also be a good companion. You were a final choice. Believe it or not, John, you were the best of the best. That's why we chose you. I signaled the waiter for more coffee. This was too ridiculous to believe. Courtney, I don't want to interrupt, but are you saying that you plan to live with me as husband and wife while keeping Mitch Ass, your lover and soulmate? Yes, and the kids, are they mine? Yes, you can check if you feel it's necessary coming home. The evening ended quickly. I found myself at a loss for words. The conversation trailed off and we just sat there staring at each other. Of course, I still had many questions, but I was overwhelmed with emotions and afraid I might lose control. I needed time to process the information calmly without distractions. The next few days were disheartening. I struggled to understand how she could so easily accept me as a sexual partner when she was supposedly so madly in love with Mitch. They both knew that their plan involved Courtney and me being intimate. Did he have to convince her to sleep with me, or did she have to convince him to accept it? Looking back, I can't recall a single instance where there seemed to be intense romantic feelings between them. Everything appeared platonic and very casual. Most of the information I had came from accidentally discovering a text message on her phone that led to a deeper investigation which confirmed my suspicions. I could only trace things back for a short time, but I noticed that they met just once or twice a month. If that, I wouldn't call it a hot and passionate affair. I had no idea how intense things were at the start of our marriage. The text messages weren't erotic or sexual, they were very businesslike. If that's the right word, it was like scheduling an appointment with a dentist. I was sure she had brought him up to speed on the situation, and I was certain they had met to discuss how they were going to handle it. Courtney told the kids. I was on a business trip to maintain stability in the family. I had to come back home and act as normally as possible. By the end of the week, I returned to the house, into our bedroom. Aside from the absence of intimacy, our life seemed to go back to normal. I signed up for a gym membership. I wasn't overweight or out of shape, but I wasn't exactly handsome either. I felt like I was now competing for my own wife, though I wasn't even sure if I wanted to stay with her. While I didn't have a concrete plan, I was motivated to keep myself in better shape and be healthier. I started waking up earlier for breakfast. I had a protein shake and then went straight to the gym while everyone else was still asleep. I showered at the gym and went directly to work. One day was cardio and the next was fitness and strength training. I found myself becoming obsessed with exercise. I also started working longer hours and more often on weekends. I volunteered for trips and seminars, anything to distract myself for a wild thought. I was amazed that I could maintain a normal relationship with Courtney under these circumstances. We never talked about the issue. The only time things changed was in the bedroom. We were in limbo, no direction, no plan, no future. It felt like I was living with a housemate Juan happened to share a bed with. I needed help. Reflections, spending 4 days a week, an hour at a time on a treadmill or exercise machine, gives you plenty of time to think I liked being married. I had never imagined myself married to anyone other than Courtney. I still could. And even though I couldn't forgive her for the betrayal, it confused me. The more I thought about it, the more tangled my thoughts became. She was married to me but was sleeping with someone else. So I was the Chuck, or was it him? The man she cheated on me with had been her partner long before I met her. Was she cheating on me with him, or was she cheating on him with me? It was so easy to get confused. Does a piece of paper called a marriage certificate matter, or is it all about how we perceive the relationship? Courtney and Mitch had different views on family and marriage, somehow without realizing it. I got pulled into this situation and was used to resolve their conflict. The price Mitch had to pay for Courtney's happiness was allowing me to have her sexually. Knowing how close they were, it must have been difficult for him to accept that decision. Still, I had been used and I didn't like it yet. It felt like I was benefiting more from the deal. For about 2 weeks I struggled with my own mental dilemma, and then I decided that since I wasn't going to divorce Courtney or leave, I would continue being intimate with her. I would do my best not to become bitter or revengeful before starting this new phase of my marriage. I also decided it was time to set some basic ground rules. That same day I booked a dinner reservation, the agreement. The evening started off slowly, just like last time. Courtney seemed hesitant to initiate any conversation. I wanted to lay everything out, but I couldn't bring myself to begin. The waiter broke the silence. "Can I offer you anything else?" There was nothing dramatic about it, but it helped get us talking. Just some more coffee. "Please, I think we should wrap things up." It looks like they're eager to close, Courtney. I would like things to go back to normal if we can. Under the circumstances, there are a few things I think we need to agree on. It's nothing complicated, and if you don't like what I'm about to suggest, I'm open to hearing a counter. She nodded for me to continue and gave a slight smile. First, if you don't mind, I'd like us to start having sex again. Sleeping together is nice, but I really miss the intimacy. I may have some difficulty at first, but I hope I'll get through it and things will go back to normal. Do you have any issues with that? Courtney nodded and mouthed okay. Second, I'd like us to continue living together as husband and wife until the kids are grown. Once there are no children left in the house, we'll quietly divorce and go our separate ways. We expect Danny to either go to college or get married in about 10 years. Can you hang in there that long? There was a brief pause, as if she was deep in thought. John, are you saying that if things go well, we'll stay together until there are no more kids in the house and then we'll be able to part ways? No, we will part ways. That's not negotiable. But what if she never finished the sentence? Thought I looked at her, waiting for a more definite answer. Finally, she raised her eyes and mouthed okay again, but this time without a smile. Lastly, I feel it's okay for you to continue your relationship with Mitch, but I insist you do it in a way that keeps me out of it. I'm not thrilled with the situation, but I think it would be difficult and stressful for both of us. If I insisted that you stop seeing him, I can't and won't spend my energy trying to end endure. I never finished that sentence. I didn't wait for my wife's response. I stood up, tossed 320s onto the table and pulled out her chair so we could leave. The drive home was quiet. There was no sex that night. My big mistake. The terms I laid out were never openly discussed again. It seemed they were automatically accepted. As soon as I presented them, we started having sex again. At first it wasn't great, but slowly we got used to each other again and things improved. Family life returned to normal as the sex got better. It also became a bit rougher. I didn't do it on purpose, but I think I was feeling competitive, so I tried harder. I became more demanding about the types of sex and how often it happened. Courtney never refused or complained. After some time, the novelty wore off and I found myself settling back into routine. I think I was trying to prove a point. The most unusual thing I realized over time was that I stopped feeling like I was being cheated on. Technically, I suppose I was, but mentally I started to view it differently. Courtney was Mitch's woman. She had always been his. I used her as I pleased, whatever I wanted, and there was nothing he could do about it. Sure, I fed her, gave her shelter, and clothed her. But I convinced myself that it was the price I paid for her services and for taking care of the kids. I didn't know about the time she spent with them as we had agreed. What I didn't know didn't hurt me. One day when my car needed an oil change, I decided to stop by the Firestone shop where Mitch worked. While my car was being serviced, I stood in front of the glass window overlooking the service area and watched my wife's lover. At first he didn't notice, but after a while it became clear he paused for a moment, realizing who I was. I'm sure he'd seen me before, but never under these circumstances. He spent nearly an hour working with the tire machine and I watched him the entire time. I didn't flinch once and he noticed when my car was finally ready. I stepped away from the window and left. He looked embarrassed the whole time. I felt some relief, but not much. A week later I took Courtney's car in for an oil change and did the same thing. About half an hour in, he just stopped working and stared at me with a wide grin on my face. I gave him 2 big thumbs up and laughed. He couldn't hear me, but he saw it. I stepped away from the window and soon left. The next day everything fell apart. When I came home from work, I noticed the kids weren't there. There was no dinner, but Courtney was waiting. You're a filthy son of a bitch. That was a solid opener, and there was more to come. I sat down as she paced around the kitchen table, glaring at me. For 10 years. Mitch and I never humiliated or disrespected you in any way. For 10 years we gave you as much attention as we could to keep things running smoothly. Now you've decided to act like a jerk. You go to his job and make a fool out of him. You humiliate him in front of his coworkers and laugh about it. You have everything. A good home, a good job, wonderful kids, and a wife. He has nothing, but you still feel the need to degrade him even more. That was a disgusting thing to do. And right now, I'm ashamed to be your wife. I didn't move. She was right. We have an agreement, and I'm willing to stick to it. But if you ever put me in an embarrassing position like that again, I'll walk out the door and take the kids with me. I didn't respond. Do you understand? Yes, good. I'm going to take a shower call and order some pizza. The kids are staying overnight at your parents'. While I waited for the pizza, I came to an important realization. I had been a jerk moving on. The next day, Courtney was back to normal. No one mentioned my foolishness again. I never set foot in the Firestone shop again. I began focusing on work and the kids. The next few years went smoothly. It was as if those few weeks had been erased from our collective memory. I didn't check on how she was doing in any way. It wasn't that I didn't care, but more that I didn't want to know. Gilbert Enterprises rewarded my hard work with a rain of promotion. I was now also heading a new department. My knowledge in the field was shaky, but I knew how to manage my team effectively, and that paid off. Our friends and family never found out about the affair, and we successfully presented ourselves as a loving, happy family. As far as I know, the kids had no idea. Surprisingly, I didn't feel bitter. I genuinely enjoyed our relationship and my connection with Courtney. Occasionally, thoughts of her and Mitch crossed my mind, but they passed quickly. I convinced myself that Mitch, not I, was the one who had been cuckolded. I had taken his woman and used her. It was a bit delusional, but it helped me cope. Doc Bobby graduated high school and immediately enlisted in the Air Force. Danny earned a good scholarship to the University of Pennsylvania, and we had enough savings to cover all her other expenses. The day after Danny left, Courtney and I had a conversation. You knew this day would come. Yes, Mitch must be happy that it's finally over. John, I haven't seen or spoken to Mitch over 6 years. I have no idea where he is now. This was good news, but I tried not to show it. Of course. I knew why she hadn't seen Mitch, but I would never tell her that I truly didn't want her to leave. Despite the affair, I still loved her. I wanted to tell her that, but my foolish pride kept me silent. Before I could say anything, she spoke again. John, as I recall, you said we would stay together as long as the kids were at home. Is that right? Yes, I'm pregnant, 2 foolish people. Things were not going as I had expected. I got up and went outside. The fresh air helped me calm down. I sat on the porch, staring into the distance. Courtney came out and sat beside me. She placed her hand on mine but didn't say anything. We both had tears in our eyes. I now realized that she truly wanted to stay together. This was a desperate move on her part, and I was sure she had spent a lot of time preparing for this moment. You know, I had a vasectomy 6 years ago, right? Yes, that was a sneaky move. I also think you regretted doing it. Why? Because it effectively ended our marriage. I didn't want it to end. I didn't want that either, but I don't understand why you think this pregnancy will change anything. Given your revelation, it would lead to the opposite of what you wanted. I didn't have a choice if you had given me any hint, any hope I might have done things differently. I didn't want to lose you all right. I'll ask who is the father of the child. Courtney reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out an envelope. This cost me more than $8,000. I have no idea who the father is, but you and I are going to raise this child as our own. Those were your terms, and I'm going to hold you to them. At the top of the document inside it read Lee Hebert's infertility clinic. Thank you for listening until the end. See you in the next episode of English Epic. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.